start by introducing Josh Cohen, who then will take it over from me. Josh will be known to many of you from different quarters. He's a professor of modern literary theory at Goldsmith University. He's an author of a number of wonderful books on psychoanalysis, including Not Working, Why We Have to Stop. He's got great titles. The Private Life, Why We Remain in the Dark, and How to Read Freud, among others. These books have brought psychoanalytic thinking to the wider public in a thoughtful, informative, and accessible way. And finally, he's a psychoanalyst, supervisor, teacher, and a fellow of the British Psychoanalytical Society. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce you, and over to you.
I'll tell you what, I'll do away with my preambles and just introduce my fellow panelists. To my furthest right, I don't think Helena Bonham Carter needs much introduction for anybody here. You will recognize her from so many films and stage. Sorry. No, not really. No. From films. Maybe, who knows, in the future, yes, absolutely, yeah. And of course, as the narrator of this extraordinary film, and to my immediate right, Bianca Stigter, made the film we've just seen and been so impressed by in every sense. It's in the sense of it having really made the deepest impression. Bianca, I just want to start really by asking you if you could tell us a bit about the origins of this project, how you came across the film, and what it was that motivated you to make this extraordinary piece of work.
Yes, well, I first came across it, I think, in 2012 on Facebook. There was a Facebook post about the book that Glenn Kurtz, who you hear speaking a lot in the film, wrote about the film his grandfather made, and it said that you could see this the footage on the website of the Holocaust Museum. And I was very intrigued, so I went over there and watched the footage. You can even watch the footage of their whole trip there, but of course the Polish part is the most uncommon, let's say. And already when I was watching it that first time, and you see all these details and his children, and everyone looks so alive, and then it stops, because it's, of course, 3 minutes is wonderful that we have them, but still it's very short when you would watch only the 3 minutes and boom, it's over. So that first time when I was watching it, I already had the thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could extend it, to lengthen it in any way. But I was not working as a filmmaker at all at that time, more as a film critic. So I didn't do anything with it until a few weeks later, the Rotterdam Film Festival asked me to make a kind of video essay. And usually that is about contemporary fiction films. But I thought, this is my chance. I asked if I can do something with this material. And I said, okay, go and try. And I contacted Glenn and I interviewed him, but you still hear a lot of that talk in the film. And then we made a version of, I think, 25 minutes that was shown on the Rotterdam Film Festival in 2014, I think, or 15. And then I thought there's still more to be done with this material. I'm not finished. And then we worked another 5 years to get it to this stage.
Thank you. The term film essay is actually quite illuminating. It immediately casts some light around what the film is and what you've done with the footage. And it makes me want to bring you in, Helena, because actually something I became aware of that I really didn't notice when I first watched this on video. I mean, this is a completely different quality of experience watching on a big screen, and having the sound being really immersive, was that your narration is completely different. You start to notice that it isn't the narration of a conventional documentary history, that you actually speak almost as a character. You bring the force of your personality to the narration of the film, and it gives a kind of curiosity and singularity to the actual script. I wondered if that was part of what drew you to being part of this project.
Nothing's really as intentional in a way than what it ends up. So the way this all happened was, well, there were several sort of semi-accidents. How I became involved was that Steve McQueen phoned, who was a producer, and I'd worked with him as a director. We did something. In fact, it was shelved. But that's a whole other story. I'm really glad it was shelved because I was naked for most of it. So somewhere or other, no one will ever see this. But you saw it. But never mind. Yeah, you're the only one who saw it. But anyway, then Steve got on really well when I could understand what he was saying, because he talks like lightning. And he phoned up and said, "I'm really, really excited. I've got this project, a documentary project, and a really interesting, it's so special, and a really interesting director. Could you maybe talk to her and see if you would click and connect?" And this was during COVID, I think. So I met Bianca on the phone. We had this great conversation, great Sunday morning conversation, and I immediately I hadn't seen any of it, but she described what it was, and I said, of course, I think this sounds so intriguing. I come from a certain amount of Jewish ancestry myself, and also I'm always intrigued about those who've gone before and those who didn't get to have grandchildren, didn't get to have a life, let alone the next second or third generation. That's a whole other thing. So then I talked to Bianca. Actually, that's quite funny, is that by the end I was going, so where do you live, Bianca? I live in Amsterdam. I said, oh wow, that's where Steve lives. That's amazing. So is there lots of cafe life in Amsterdam? Is that how you met? Did you show Steve your film at a cafe? I just had this whole fantasy of how it came about, and finally Bianca said, Steve's my husband. And so I said, oh, okay. But it was just so touching that Steve had failed to mention a crucial thing, that this was, in fact, on it says a family, what's your production company? A family affair. Family affair. Yeah, exactly. So I'm slightly anyway, so I said, then I was sent the narration prior to doing it. Steve came to London, but because of COVID, Bianca was stuck in Amsterdam. And we had the video connection. So I had that really interesting, the husband and wife teamed together, Bianca on a small screen, and then Steve in full 3D, and both of us in a studio in London. And it was only going there. I said I've only got the narration because I love prepping. That's my thing. I have to prep mostly because of anxiety that. Unless I prep, I'm going to be shit. So, but I thought, well, maybe I should watch it before. But then, having done narration to picture, sometimes it's more exciting to literally watch something and you read to picture, and it's alive, in a way, more alive. But then I just got the message from Bianca, said well, there isn't really. It's going to be difficult to send you it because we don't leave the film. I'd seen the 3 minutes, but I hadn't seen any more. And I'd envisaged kind of what you said, Josh, that we'd move out, we'd see who David Kurtz was, Maurice Chandler. In my head, I was going great, I can't wait to meet these guys and see what they look like on celluloid. And then they said, no, this is it. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be so boring. This is really monotonous. This is a bad idea. But I didn't tell them. So I said, wait, it's Steve McQueen, it's Bianca, she seems so great, and it's just such a great, the essay was great, it was so I went and did it, and it was harrowing, because it is harrowing to the material, and because you got a real sense of claustrophobia, because we were just with those. But there's a lot of levity. Steve loves football, you love football. And in the end, we got into rhythm that if I did everything 3 times, the third got into the net, as it were. So that's how it happened. And in a way, when I looked at the essay, I thought, I'm basically being Bianca. You know, it's not me. It was, you know, I have no authority on this. She's the authority. So I just thought, let me just try and I'm being Bianca investigating this piece of film and all the process. And in fact, I am when I'm talking to David Kurtz at the end, you know, and he actually says, he interrupts. That wasn't, obviously it was Bianca's interview. So I was being Bianca, but without the accent. Yeah. That's what was required.
And I think apart from the beauty of the voice, I think it's also very good to have a narrator. That was important for me, that is not like, you know, that's called the voice of God, someone all-knowing of the Morgan Freeman that knows everything that's going down. And when you read it, it's like you're just one little step ahead of the audience. You're also discovering everything as you go along. So it becomes a much more active adventure.
It's alive, but that's also the way you made that film. It's somebody who's discovering, and that's what's so different and original about it, is not presented, and it's alive in itself because you're thinking your way through it. And I love the way of thinking like, well, is this or that? Or you're raising all the questions rather than having answered. And in some ways that's more, that's innately more dramatic, and you're holding the audience by the hand. You know, we're more present in the making of it. And you know, it's
kind of
it's a piece of art.
Everybody
Bianca.
would ask.
It's not your average documentary. This is like, you know, I'm so proud to be part of it because it really is. There's nothing else like it.
It is. It is a piece of art, and the tone of puzzlement and surprise that I find in your voice is there in the various moments of discovery in the film. I think that sequence about the Sklep, where the archivist reconstructs the letters of the name. There's something quite miraculous, quite magical.
Yeah, it was really miraculous because in the book and in the first version of the film we made, it was like, okay, this is it. You cannot, you know, this is what the celluloid will tell us, and the rest will stay hidden and secret forever. And then the production company, put me in contact with a very good researcher in Poland, and I asked her, can you go over all the things in the footage that we are still not haven't found the answers to? And then she did, and it was wonderful. And I went to Warsaw and to Nashels to record sound and to talk to the Polish historian, and she just in our hotel room she just did it in one take.
Wow,
it was great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Helena mentions this terrible idea of declining to expand outwards from the 3 minutes, but did you know from the beginning that that's what that you were going to stay with the film for the entirety?
Yes, that was the starting point for me. And very often, of course, when you make something, you discover along the way, like, it doesn't work. I have to change it a bit. But I think in this case, it stayed. We could stay with that principle because it makes everything more poignant for me, and it's, if you had done other things it would dilute it more, except that of course I understood I'm also a very curious person, so you want to know what the people that you hear what they look like, especially Mr. Chandler when you see him as a child. So then I thought, okay, at the end of the picture we'll give everyone's portrait, and this is so much a movie about faces, let's for a change also give the portraits of everyone who worked on the film, the editor and the musicians and so on.
And there are 2 of his relatives whose faces you see at the end, 2 female relatives.
Yeah, that's his daughter and granddaughter.
You can see his face from 1938 in theirs.
Absolutely.
I
The
mean,
cheek, the
the
cheeks.
effect is absolutely startling. Yeah. So the idea of lengthening, it yields so much emotional punch, but it also has a kind of philosophical undertow to it. It feels like an existential meditation on film as well as on history. And I just wondered if you could take us a bit more into that, because in a way this seems to me about time.
Absolutely.
And about the way that we inhabit a present, and that it kind of casts light on the predicament of living in the present, which is that you don't know what's going to happen. And that insight, which is, banal and obvious to us most of the time, becomes absolutely revelatory and startling when you watch this film.
Yes, well, yeah, I'm a historian, have a very historical imagination. So for me, there's also, something of Pompeii about this film, that you can suddenly, and that's of course the wonderfulness of film, that you can suddenly, in a way, of course it's always an illusion, but in a way access another time, at least see what it looks like. It's almost a kind of magic, like Mr. Gentler says. It is kind of magic that we can see these people and almost look them in the eye, and that I think also gives you so much tension, because you're so close, but then but you cannot get closer because time has taken its course. When with this first film of the Lumiere brothers, that a train was coming to the audience and everyone did this. With this film, I have, you want to warn the people and run, go, flee, but you can't. So you feel, in a way, very paralyzed while watching it. I think there's a lot of, for these 3 minutes, gives you a lot of conflicting emotions.
Yeah, it's not quite the word, but there's almost something cruel about watching the film from our vantage point.
Absolutely.
And
we know and they don't know, and that gives, of course, a totally unequal position.
So that's one of the reasons why there's that central sequence from the Ringelblum book that feels very important in the film, because in a way it is the one moment that we're taken out of the immediacy of the 3 minutes and into this aftermath.
Not really.
Not really.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, right? But it's no. Go
it's
on,
just I thought, how can you tell this story with the images that we have in the film, because obviously from that there are no pictures. Although in that testimony it is said that the German soldiers took pictures of how they humiliated the victims. So maybe in some attic in Hamburg or Berlin, those pictures are still there, but they have not been found. So the only thing we had that connected this testimony to this film is the footage of the square. That's where it happened, and I thought it's important to give you that whole testimony, and not like normally in a film it would be you get a little inkling and then it's summarized and that was it. But I thought it's very important to listen to the whole thing. And what can we show? We just do a zoom into the cobblestones of that square, so you're still there, but it becomes more abstract as it kind of fades in memory.
Yes, and then in a way, as a kind of counterpoint, we get that wonderful story of the young man who takes his girlfriend out of the synagogue. How did you come to discover that story?
That was from the book by Glenn Kurtz, because Mr. Lubinetsky, he passed away in 2017. And then this, what you hear, is from an interview that Glenn did with this man. Yeah, whose wonderful voice and wonderful accent after all these years. It's very beautiful to listen to. They all have great voices. Mr. Chandler has a great voice.
Yes. Yes. It feels the quality of voices feels like one of the really important features of the film, because we don't see the faces.
Exactly, but they are so individual and rich personalities already, only from the voice, in my opinion.
I think it also means that you really listen to people. You've got no other distractions.
Exactly.
So we're really listening to them.
It's heightened.
And the whole thing, in a way, is really listening to these people who they need to be listened to. They need to be witnessed, don't they? That's kind of the act of memorial. You have to. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I came across by accident this morning a beautiful quote by Walter Benjamin saying, "It's much more difficult to honor the memory of the anonymous than of the renowned," and that is what this film is all about.
Yeah, because I think what's also so paradoxically compelling about these 3 minutes is that so little happens in them. We're really just looking at a small village that is transfixed by a movie camera.
Just, it feels like very much a slice of life.
Yeah.
Just he turned on the camera, filmed, and that was it.
Yeah, that's right. And you get these lovely little bits of horseplay. I mean, we keep going back to that image of the older boy. I don't know if it's his sister or but sort of pushing the face of the young girl, the one who keeps appearing in the film, in fact.
How interesting you say maybe sister, but that's interesting. When people so this is maybe not the end point, there's still more to know about the footage. It's not exhausted. I have a friend and she's a dentist, and when she watches a film she always looks at people's teeth. And then she said, yes, there's that boy who looks a bit like that drawing from Mad magazine. There's the gap between his teeth. And she said, there's a lady a few seconds later who has the same gap between the teeth. And this is a very hereditary condition. So the chance that she is his mother is very big. And I had never thought about trying to identify someone from what their teeth look like. So you know, who knows what else will still be found.
Yeah, but you do enter into. I mean, did you find this, Helena, that as you were watching, you entered into a kind of imaginative relationship with all these characters and gave them lives, you conferred lives on them yourself.
Well, the longer as you went on, you could see that some kids were trying again. I think that's why he's pushing her out, because the girl with the pigtails is in right from the start. So it's like she always needs to be on camera. And also all of them are trying to move with the camera, which is great, because they're lengthening their memorial, They're making sure that now, looking back on it, that's as long as they're getting.
And that is also, I think, for one of the impulses when you see it, because you see that they so much want to be seen, not necessarily by us, but still, we are indulging them in a way. We are seeing them over all this 80 odd years of time.
I think my favourite, the character I most enjoyed imagining, was that the matriarch on the stairs who comes out and she's yelling at everybody, and then Mum comes out and suddenly she's nice as pie.
I like very much the girl with the short hair. She's also in the restaurant, and she's on the steps of the synagogue, and then
she's very haunting.
She tries to stay on camera, and then that's all the guy just pushes her out. Yeah. But we can, thanks to the magic of editing, we can hold her there a little bit
Yes,
longer.
that's right. And
Yeah.
she's quite tenacious, actually.
Yes,
She keeps
she
looking at
keeps-
the
and
camera,
she
even when she's
very
being
steady,
pushed.
yeah.
Okay. Is it time, perhaps, to turn? Because I think so many people will have questions, and I would like I would like Bianca and Helena to be able to hear them. So, questions, comments, please.
So we've got one mic here.
There's a.
Sorry. Sorry.
Raise your hand any time to let me know you'll want to ask a question, and I can have you in mind.
My name is Lydia Tischler, and my comment is I happened to be in Krakow when the Germans invaded, and I can confirm the difference of behavior between the army and the SS. We happened to live in a flat of some distant relatives, and a Luftwaffe officer was billeted with us. And when he discovered that my mother got up at 3 in the morning to queue for bread, he brought us some bread. And he called her Madam, a Jewish, he knew we were Jewish. And it was such a stark contrast to the way that the SS behaved when they saw, and in Poland there were many Orthodox Jews with pious and skull caps. They just tormented them. They beat them and they made them clean the pavement with toothbrushes. It really was an absolute contrast the way the two parts of Germany behaved.
Did you want to come back on that?
Just thank you very much for sharing this with us.
Yeah, and thank you. It's an honour to have you with us. The gentleman right in the middle of the auditorium.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for that. That's very loud. Wonderful film. I'm really impressed. Well, can you tell us a bit more how that Mr. Chandler did survive with his papers during the war?
Yes, he spoke Polish quite well. So he hid in the countryside, and a Polish woman said, "I know there's a Polish boy your age. He died, so we are going to get you his identity card." And that happened. And then he moved around the Polish countryside, working as a farmhand, but often having very near that he would be caught because he wouldn't know exactly what Christmas was or what the Christmas songs he had to sing, and sometimes they wanted to go swimming and then he couldn't because he would be circumcised and they couldn't see that. So for 2 years he lived in terror, and by his wits he managed to survive. No, all his family was murdered, I think. Yes. And then also the wonderful thing was he had as you can hear from what he all remembers, he had a very photographic memory, and he remembered an uncle from America had come to visit in the 30s, and he remembered the address that was on his trunk. So he wrote a letter to that address after the war. But the uncle, meanwhile, had died. But the postman said, a letter from Poland, I know the family of this man, so I will deliver the letter to them somewhere else. And that's how he got to go to America. All these stories are in the book that Glenn Kurtz wrote, so I highly If you want to know more, please read it. It's a very beautiful and insightful book.
At the back.
I think Josh was pointing to someone else. Were you pointing to me, Josh, or someone
I
else?
was pointing to the gentleman
Lady here.
gentleman with glasses, but oh, sorry, lady with glasses. Sorry, but Dave, you'll come next.
Oh, thank you very much. I think it was a real privilege to be able to hold the people in the film and to be there with them in that time. But I'm also left, I'm really interested in intergenerational trauma, and I'm thinking, yes, I feel overwhelmed and guilt from watching that, and I'm just interested in how the generations, the survivors that you've met, how they're dealing with being able to see the film, and whether they feel it's a privilege or if they've been left with unbearable guilt of surviving.
That's a very difficult question for me to answer. I think it will differ from person to person, and what your background is, how you can deal with that. I think for Mr. Chandler, the finding of the footage was a very important moment, because then he says in the movie, he says, now I'm not from Mars, so you get a world that is destroyed, you can actually show a little bit of. That was for him a very important thing, and I think his children and grandchildren are also happy with the film, and at least with the found back footage.
Thank you, and Dave.
I'd like to start just by thanking you from the bottom of my heart for the most extraordinary aesthetic achievement. I've seen the film already once, I could easily watch it again, but I think I think Josh hinted at it at the beginning, about the utterly, in a way, quotidian and ephemeral, and yet it's lent this sort of universal and transcendent or metaphysical, or whatever word you want to use, quality, which is so haunting and gives it that incredible depth, I think. It also, when Josh was saying earlier about we look back because we know what happens, I think that's such an interesting and important comment, because in a way there's a kind of, we can't get away from it, we know they don't, but there's something about the innocence of their faces, which is the innocence of us all, which is what Josh is saying, because we don't know what's going to happen. So we're all caught in that innocent moment. But I just wanted to add something a bit more personal, is that my grandfather came from Nishalsk.
Oh, wow.
And he left long before this. And many years ago, when I was visiting Poland, I went to Nishalsk. And it was the most bizarre experience, because it felt kind of fetishistic. I had to go to Nishalsk because it's where my grandfather came from. So I got out of the car with Wojtek, my friend, and we wandered around. And I thought, well, here I am in Nishalsk then. Now what? Because there's nothing. So I got back in the car and we went back to Warsaw. And it made me think of an image that Murakami used in one of his novels, where there's children, they've all lost their memory. Mm-hmm. And a psychiatrist comes along and he explains to the populace there's two kinds of memory loss. He said, you need to think of it like a train going along. In one kind of memory loss, you see all the carriages have got things in them, and then there's one with nothing. That's one kind of memory loss. But there's another kind where the carriage just drops out, so you don't even know that the loss isn't there. It's gone. You've got the loss of the loss. So I think when I went to Nechansk the first time, funny I say that because I just feel I've been the second time. When I went to Nechansk the first time, I was faced with this absence of absence, just nothing. And your film has put the carriage back for me, and thank you.
Thank you. I have to say though that it has changed a bit for the better now in Nashelsk. When I went there, also was the amazing thing that there was nothing. You had the feeling nobody knew anything. No one was really interested except Mr. Zawinski. But since then, the Glenn Kurtz and the descendants have gone back to clean up what is left of the Jewish cemetery. All the stones were taken out during the war. Some say to pave an airfield with, but the passes you can still see. So they clean that up every year, and they put a little memorial, how to call it, board with information there. And now, a bit after the movie was finished, a kind of monument was erected there next to the cemetery. And now also, because of the work of Glenn and a Polish organization, which is called the Forum for, and then I always forget, the Forum for Dialogue. They do a kind of programs, especially with schools, to make especially the children aware of the Jewish history of their part of town. And when we were invited in Warsaw to show the film in a festival, I said, okay, could you also arrange that we can show the film in Nashelsk itself? And they did, and it was actually shown in a cinema that was already a cinema in 1938 and was a stone's throw away from what you see here. So that was very special. And then all the school children gave us a kind of tour of Jewish Nashelsk. They could say, here was the grocery store, and that was the house of Mr. Chandler. So in a way, at least that memory is now a bit more present in the town itself.
Yes.
Hi. This film is very resonates with me on the level of I never went to where my grandmother, my Buba, was from in Kozieniec in Poland, but her 11 brothers and sisters. They died in Auschwitz and Buchenwald. Apart from 2 survivors who were in Paris, I'm trying to put together my dad's memoirs of all the stories. She left Poland in 1933 and went to Paris. She was in Poland. She was incarcerated for being on a trade union demonstration for a year, and her brother was blacklisted in Poland, left to go to Paris, lived in Le Marais, and his wife and daughter were taken in the roundup to the velodrome and died in Treblinka. Simultaneously, my cousins in Paris have written a book about her cousins, the 2 cousins. They're now, in the last couple of years, passed away, who were also in survivors from Buchenwald. And it's like seeing that film is like seeing a similar kind of memory.
Thank you, Natty.
Thank you so much. It's very moving.
One of the things I've noticed just being in this discussion and listening to people is how this film seems to elicit. Sorry, one of the things I've noticed being in this discussion is how this film seems to elicit the most intimate, deepest memories from the people watching them. That in a way that's part of the experience of watching it, is that it reaches deeply into people's memories. So it's been an extraordinary, it feels like an extension of the film really, or what people have shared today.
Yeah, it's very humbling to see that a film can have that kind of effect. It's beautiful.
At the back.
Just a comment about remembering, especially after the previous speakers. Remembering for people who don't have that immediate personal connection, and thinking about how memory passes into history and how we can retain some of the memory poignancy when it passes into history. And I was thinking about the idea of 3 minutes and an extension. There were two kinds of extension. One was the attempt to find out biographically whatever could be found out. And the other was very different. It was the repetition. And both Josh and Dave have referred to I just forgot the point I was going to make about that. Oh yes, it was about the cruelty, the way in which we can distance ourselves with the feeling that, well, we know what they don't know. And it made me think of the importance of repetition. It's what Freud called the repetition compulsion, as if it's something that needs to be known. It keeps forcing its way until it can become part of thought. And I thought the use of repetition was extremely powerful, because yes, the first time you could say, well, I know what they don't know, and one can even feel cruel. But it's that cruelty that becomes a defense against remembering. But then you see it again, and again, and again, and you begin to think, no. I am closer to that than my defensive cruelty is maintaining. And I think it's a powerful way of keeping memory in history, and a very, very powerful lesson. Thank you.
Well, you nailed it, because that was really how I was thinking about it. I had the feeling we were working on two tracks, let's say. One, to find out as much information as possible, and the other in a more kind of looser or poetic way, just let these people be on the screen and let us be with them. That were kind of the two things I tried to put in the movie.
Also, just something that, I'm not sure it's of any interest, but it's something that struck me having seen it now, this is the second time, maybe the third time, but just watching the children and this community, and it's intact, and they're alive, and they're going about their real daily life. And that alongside the footage that we see of when Jewish people were rounded up and their heads were shaved and they were given numbers and they're completely dehumanized. And I'm sure that was done to them so people could stop relating to them. So for me, I think it's just such a wonderful tribute to those set of people, that you could see them as they were in their normal day, with their proper identities, before everything was taken away from them and they were put in the uniform and they were branded with numbers, and their hair was taken off. And in a way that stands for every single community. That's what I think Natty feels. It's like those were you can relate to the people who didn't survive, the people who didn't grow up, the people who didn't have children or grandchildren, because that's a sort of that was a sort of ordinary life that they had.
No, absolutely. I think that's a very important point, because 6 million, that number is so abstract, you can't really put your head around it. And then here, for at least a few people, it's very much stressed that all these millions were individuals. They were men, women, children, and anything in between, with their own idiosyncrasies and their own life. And if the film can make you realize that, that is very
I think
wonderful.
it gives the dignity back to the person.
And the individuality.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Ora, you had sorry. The mic is coming.
I think it's just a few words. My parents are from Poland. I was born just after the war, so I have that history in me, as so many Polish Jews have. And what some people nowadays are looking back into their histories, and I know that you went to look into your pre-war history, Jewish one, Helena. It's also a great documentary, by the way. But there is an urge to know what happened to Ruth like, and that's why we go to Hereditary website and all kinds of. But the other side of it, that so little can be recovered, and not everyone wants to know or can bear to know. So one of the things that we all know, that our parents or grandparents who survived it found it very hard to talk about it. And some didn't talk at all. I come from a family where both my parents couldn't bear to tell me about the most powerful losses in their lives, a wife, a child. So I think your film, in a way, gives an opportunity for someone like me to see what it was like. Because my father and mother came from a very similar shtetl, so probably looked more or less the same. Something I can see, but also don't know much about, because they found it so painful to talk about it. So it's another absence in the mind that people talk about so well. It can be filled, but maybe imagination and the importance of it, the importance of wanting to know and keep it. It's very difficult to do that, both to remember and to forget. It is difficult. So people like you are incredibly important to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the middle.
Yeah, it just occurred to me why I found it so moving. And I think it's because the children are so eager to be memorialized.
Exactly.
It's as though, in some spooky way, they knew. Not literally, but that's from our perspective. That's what we kind of impose upon it. And it's also touching that they are familiar with a different technology. They're all kind of lining up for a group portrait rather than a moving camera. They don't know how to behave with the moving camera, but they know how to memorialize themselves in a group portrait. Yeah. That's just a comment.
No, it's true, because you really feel you can. They are looking at you as if you can exchange something, which is obviously not true, but it does give you that very feeling of that there is this kind of contact over the years.
I think it's time to wrap up, but of course the film and in fact the discussion will stay with us, will lengthen with us, I think, for much longer than the confines of this session. So I want to offer my thanks to Helena and of course to Bianca for making this quite spellbinding, beautiful film, this testament to a lost past. And thanks to all of you, particularly those of you who have shared your incredibly moving memories. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Before you go, I just want to thank you all for spending your Sunday morning here. And just so as you know, you've all raised, I think it's £4,500 for the CPU, which, if my maths is good enough, that's 3 years of psychotherapy, isn't it? Yeah. For somebody. And so thank you. But if you want to contribute more, every little bit counts, or even bigger bits count. So you can just say that in your little envelopes there are ways that you can give more if you feel moved to. And thank you for coming. And thank you.